A lot of people tell me that they struggle with really mastering the hand cannon and consistently achieving those crispy 3-shot kills in Destiny 2 PvP. If you'd really like to focus on improving your hand cannon shot and getting better results in the Crucible, then this video is for you. We're going to be diving into exactly what makes hand cannons so powerful in every single meta, and more importantly, how to harness that power by using 5 essential tips. After using hand cannons for over 5 years and getting tens of thousands of kills, I consider the tips in this video to be the most important things to consider while using a hand cannon. I'm sure that if you keep these 5 things in mind and integrate them into your gameplay, you will start to see tangible improvements to your accuracy and efficiency with hand cannons. These are the things I wish people told me when I was less experienced, so hopefully this video helps you along your journey towards hand cannon mastery. Alright, so for tip number 1, this is going to be the longest tip and perhaps the most important one in this video. This is proper use of cover. In fact, the interaction between cover and hand cannon gameplay is what makes hand cannons in particular so dominant when used correctly. Due to this interaction that I'm about to explain, hand cannons will always remain near the top of the meta even when there are tons of other options that kill faster. Hand cannons deal a lot of damage with a single shot, especially on the slower firing archetypes like the 120 RPM ones that have been dominating since Beyond Light released. The large amount of damage allows them to be incredibly good at doing something known as peek shooting, the action of only leaving cover for a split second to take your shot. This is accomplished by taking engagements near cover and then hiding in cover during the downtime between each hand cannon shot. Doing this will make it very difficult for your opponent to deal damage to you, especially if they're using a fully automatic weapon like an auto rifle. Take a look at this example. My opponent Tony over there is using a 720 RPM auto rifle, a weapon that kills in exactly 0.77 seconds. I am using an Igneous Hammer, a weapon that kills in exactly 1 second. So if we both hit all headshots, he should win because his weapon kills faster, right? Well, under normal circumstances, yes, but due to me using the peek shot technique, I'm able to win the fight even though my weapon has a slower base time to kill. Since I go to cover between each shot, my opponent is unable to hit me during that time, and he can't achieve his optimal time to kill. But since my weapon deals so much damage per shot, it's no problem for me. In a nutshell, this is why hand cannons will always be near the top of the meta regardless of how many nerfs Bungie throws at the weapon type. Players who can optimize their cover and peek shoot are nearly unstoppable. Take a look at this footage from my teammate Apathetic, who is a master of the peek shot. He weaves in and out of cover with such speed that it's incredibly difficult to outplay him because he only shows himself for an instant. Even when I'm using the exact same weapon as him, he goes in and out of cover so fast that it's nearly impossible to react fast enough to shoot before he disappears and goes back into cover. Keep in mind that if Apathetic decides he is losing a gunfight for whatever reason, he's already right next to cover, so he can conveniently escape. So not only is the peek shot an effective way to win gunfights, but it also massively increases your survivability. Although the peek shot is a total power move, it's not the only way to use cover with a hand cannon. Another thing you can do is go to cover during an engagement and then re-engage from a different angle to give yourself a decisive advantage. Here's an example. Say I'm in a gunfight with Tony and we both land a couple shots, but then I go behind this cover and re-engage from an unexpected angle. Even though we're both equally low on health, this gives me a massive advantage because take a look from Tony's perspective. He doesn't know if I'm going to slide out on the left, jump out on the right, or go somewhere in between. He has no idea where I'm going to be, but I know exactly where he is in this situation, and that turns the odds massively in my favor and makes it much less likely that we will trade. This is a super popular technique among top players, and it's powerful even against the best of the best. Next time you game, try this out. Just remember, step 1 is to break line of sight by going into cover, and then step 2 is to take an unconventional angle by potentially using your vertical space. I promise it will make you win a ton of engagements that normally would have resulted in a loss or the all too common trade. The final cover technique that I want to share is using certain parts of the map to hide your character model and make it harder for your opponent to hit you. This is a popular technique for snipers as well, but if you can find areas of the map to obscure your body, you're just making it that much harder for your opponent to hit their shots. For example, this spot is what is known as a head glitch. Your opponent can only see your head, but you're still able to fire at them. A word of warning though, you want to be careful with how close you are to the edge of cover when you're low on health. If you've got 1 HP remaining but you stay right on the edge of cover, I guarantee any knowledgeable opponent will throw his grenade and get a free kill on you. So if you're low, give yourself a little space to recover. Although cover is definitely important, you've got to also have the optimal stats, perks, and mods if you want to be successful with hand cannons, and this is tip number 2. For hand cannon stats, the importance of each can vary a little bit depending on which type of hand cannon you're using, but generally speaking, you want to focus on range and then stability. That's why Ricochet Rounds, a perk that grants 5 range and 8 stability, is incredibly desirable on hand cannons. The range stat increases the distance your weapon will be effective before damage fall off, and it also makes it so your aim assist will remain active at longer ranges. The stability stat makes it so that your gun recoils less, but it is also believed to make the aim assist remain stronger while firing rapidly. In my opinion, the stability stat is most important on 120 RPM hand cannons because if you've got like no stability, the recoil can be very jarring, especially for us controller players. The Igneous Hammer has 12 more stability than the True Prophecy, for example, and that's one of the reasons why the hammer is so powerful. The handling stat can be somewhat valuable, especially after the quick draw nerf and on aggressive hand cannons, but I definitely would still prioritize range and stability first. As for perks, it really depends on what weapon you're using. Damage boosting perks like Rampage are fantastic on 120 RPM hand cannons because you can get those super crispy 2-taps. Even though a single damage boosting perk will not change the time to kill of a 140 RPM hand cannon, it will often make them more forgiving, meaning that you can hit more body shots and still achieve an optimal time to kill. Some other perks that I'd keep an eye out for include Opening Shot to give your first shot super tracking, Quick Draw if you care about swapping fast, Rapid Hit or Iron Grip for the stability bump, Killing Wind for the range mobility and handling, Rangefinder for longer distance engagements, Heating Up for the accuracy and stability, and potentially Explosive Payload to deal a ton of flinch. Finally, for your mods, you have the option of using hand cannon targeting, dexterity, loader, and unflinching. Honestly, your choice to use all of these mods depends entirely on your build and what special weapons you've got equipped, but I will say that hand cannon targeting and unflinching can be particularly helpful. The targeting mod will give you faster ADS speeds and more aim assist, which will just make your gun feel better and even more forgiving than it already is. Unflinching will make it easier to fight back while being shot, and it can totally be the difference between winning, losing, or trading, especially when you're fighting someone who is using the same type of hand cannon. Personally, I don't care much for the loader and dexterity mods, but that's largely because I main the Dragon Shadow exotic that reloads all my guns and gives me a huge handling buff whenever I dodge. Absolutely S tier exotic, by the way, I'd highly recommend it. As for the mod that slots directly into the weapon, I'd recommend Icarus here even if you don't take a lot of jump shots. Sometimes you've got to just land that one final shot to finish someone while you're in the air, and Icarus will help it connect. If you truly never ever jump, you might consider a targeting or backup mag mod, but as I explained in the last section, jumping with hand cannons can be extremely advantageous to take an unexpected approach. Oh, and also remember that 180 RPM hand cannons kind of have Icarus built in, so there's no need to use it for those weapons. Tip number 3 is to avoid rushing your shot rhythm. You've got to take your time with your shots. Like I said in the section about cover, the strength of hand cannons stems from their ability to deal a massive amount of damage per bullet. However, if you miss a bullet, that strength disappears and your time to kill will suffer as a result. Missing one bullet in your auto rifle doesn't really matter much because they fire so fast, but missing one bullet in your hand cannon can easily cause you to lose an engagement. So therefore, it's really important that you do the following to maximize your chance of hitting headshots. When getting shot by someone else, many players tend to feel pressured to rush their shots so that they can keep up with the incoming damage and hopefully win the engagement. I used to always feel this way, but honestly the best thing to do is to calm down, take a few extra moments to pace your shots, and make sure that you land those headshots. Believe it or not, this will actually help you optimize your time to kill. Shooting slightly slower and hitting headshots is always better than shooting at max RPM and missing or only hitting body shots. If you're spamming the fire button more than once per actual in-game shot, you should really focus on making one input correspond to one in-game action so that you can know exactly when the weapon will fire and you can optimize your accuracy. Here's an example to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. When I use the Igneous Hammer, hitting 3 headshots with a slightly slower rate of fire results in a much faster time to kill than firing as fast as possible and missing a bullet. I recommend starting out by firing slightly slower than the weapon's max rate of fire until you're consistently hitting the vast majority of your shots, and then work your way up to firing faster. I know it's super tempting to always fire as fast as possible, but unless you're hitting only headshots, it's just not worth it. And even if you become the best player in the world, it's still important to pace your shots. Sometimes you'll get flinched in an odd direction, or your recoil will randomly go up in a very inconvenient direction. And in situations like that, it's still going to be the best play to take a little extra time to ensure that your next shot hits. A good rule of thumb to remember is only take shots that you're confident will be headshots. At the time of recording, we're still in the 120 RPM hand cannon meta, and this is especially true right now because there is so much downtime between each shot. A single missed bullet will really inflate your time to kill and probably result in you dying. The interesting thing is that Destiny's gunplay mechanics actually encourage you to pace your shots as well. When you're firing your gun at max rate of fire, it becomes less accurate over time and the aim assist becomes less generous. This means that the bullet may not go exactly where you're aiming, and it also means the bullets will curve less towards your opponent's head. For anyone who may be unaware, bullets in Destiny 2 curve towards your opponent's head due to aim assist, and the bullet curving is exactly the same for both mouse and keyboard and controller. On controllers, you also get the added benefit of your crosshair moving slightly slower when it is on a target, making it easier to acquire and track targets. Oh, and since I got about 1,000 comments about this, yes, the last word has controller-specific tuning that makes the bullets curve extra hard, but it is the exception. Regular hand cannons have exactly the same amount of bullet curving on M&K and on controller. If you're enjoying or finding this video useful so far, a like rating would be much appreciated. The next topic we're going to cover is recoil control and aiming in general. This is something that I struggled with when I was less experienced, and I feel like it's something players don't have a super firm grasp on. For my M&K players out there, you guys will get a bit less recoil across the board, but the general ideas that I'm about to mention will still apply. If you're on controller, I recommend putting a constant amount of downward pressure on the right thumbstick to help counteract the obvious upward motion of the recoil, but that's just step one. Many hand cannons don't just recoil directly upward. If you take your hand cannon and fire it into a wall, you'll be able to see if it generally trends up and to the left, up and to the right, or just directly up. Once you know that, you can slightly adjust the direction of that constant downward pressure to account for the directional recoil. Okay, so now that you've got that constant recoil control, you've also got to make aiming adjustments. When I'm in an engagement, I start by applying this constant pressure to manage the recoil, but then I also make micro adjustments at the last second before taking my shot to account for my opponent's movement. If your opponent is standing still and not fighting back, obviously this won't be necessary, but if he's strafing, flinching you, or flying through the air, you're definitely going to have to adjust your aim in addition to controlling the recoil. Although aiming and recoil control are closely related, I think it's important to make a distinction between that downward pressure and the fine-tuning adjustments that you make to ensure that you connect that headshot. Of course, controlling your recoil is also connected to pacing your shots and the stability stat. If you've got a hand cannon with incredibly low stability for whatever reason, it may be more common to need to pace your shots in order to hit headshots. For example, when I'm using my very stable Igneous Hammer, I fire faster on average than when I'm using my lower stability bottom dollar. We're talking like fractions of a second here, but long story short, fire at a rate that allows you to control the recoil and hit the majority of your headshots. Tip number 5 is to memorize your hand cannon's effective range and then take that into account when choosing engagements and special weapons. Each hand cannon has a certain range where it starts to become ineffective due to damage and aim assist fall off. Of course, that distance is some amount of meters, but the important part is that you memorize what that distance visually looks like so that you can determine if any given opponent will be within that range. You really don't want to try fighting people too far away because if they've got something like a sniper, dead man's tail, or pulse rifle, you'll get annihilated. Conversely, you'll also want to avoid using your hand cannon in very close proximity. Shotguns, SMGs, sidearms, and fusions will destroy you up close. This is one of the reasons why 180 RPM hand cannons are kind of the worst type of hand cannon. They generally lack range and they get outclassed in close quarters. In addition, the fast fire rate of 180 hand cannons makes peak shooting with them very ineffective, which means they kinda lack one of the biggest advantages that the slower firing hand cannons have. When it comes to weapon pairings, you're probably going to want to use your hand cannon with a special weapon that excels in a range that hand cannons do not, either at very close range or very far range. This is partially why shotguns and snipers are very common special weapons to pair with hand cannons, because this allows the player to have their overall loadout cover a variety of distances. It may also be partially why pairing a fusion with a hand cannon is generally less common because there is a lot of overlap in their effective ranges. However, shotguns and snipers are just very strong in general, and they're also very fun and popular special weapons to use, regardless of if you're using a hand cannon. Now that you've got some good hand cannon fundamentals under your belt, you're going to need a subclass that synergizes well with hand cannons. I'd highly recommend my Spectral Blades build that I used to get all of the background footage in this video, and its neutral game is just perfect to pair with hand cannons and especially 120s. It's by far the best hunter subclass in my opinion, and the video on the top of your screen now covers the build and all of my best Spectral Blades tips and tricks, so be sure to check it out. It's also in the pinned comment.